I just want to say a few things about the budget. So since yesterday, I've gotten a little more information about the budget and I've spent some time with the portal, although I still have a lot of questions that I'll be asking. But I mean, the first big question I have is how are we paying for this? We see a budget proposal that is significantly higher. Meanwhile, the Board of Equalization was lower. And so I want to see where that funding's coming from. If it's coming out of cash accounts, I just don't know yet on that. I'm really concerned about some of the messaging around health and human services when it comes to our budgets. I'm deeply concerned that we're talking about Medicaid expansion and Medicaid. Medicaid expansion is specifically about working Oklahomans who don't make enough money to go to the doctor. And so when I hear the concerns from Republican leaders about Medicaid expansion, I'm concerned because my Republican colleagues do not want to increase minimum wage. We've seen no proposals to increase minimum wage, and we have many, many companies in Oklahoma paying poorly. Our average wage is very low. Republican leaders don't want to mandate paid leave, and so we have a whole lot of employees in this state who don't get sick days, who don't get maternity days, and so they might lose their job or lose money. And then we have a whole lot of folks that can't access basic medical care through their jobs, and they're not getting paid enough to do it on their own. So when we talk about Medicaid expansion, we need to remember it is working Oklahomans we're talking about. And then last, I just want to talk briefly about public education. I do want to say I'm pleased about the teacher pay raise. We need to do this regularly. I'm not saying it's enough. We cannot do this once every 5 years, but I'm glad we're making steps and that was in the budget. I'm concerned that there's so much earmarked in that education budget. There is a pretty detailed list of vendors. We even have corporate names in the list for the budget, and that concerns me. Why are we picking a vendor through a legislative political process instead of giving those funds to the education board or to the school districts themselves and letting them work out what the best curriculum is? I'm deeply concerned any time I see a corporate name in our budget list, and I saw it a couple times so far. And then, of course, the $25 million more to vouchers. I mean, I'm just going to restate that we have no accountability with those vouchers. The private school tax credit, the data we get back is solely the number of credits used, and we know their salary range, which we know many, many people who make significantly more than $100,000 are getting those vouchers. And so I just want to remind people that we do not have data that tells us we need that money set aside. $25 million more into our public schools could possibly be that support staff raise that we talked about. It could possibly be additional literacy supports. So I'm concerned that we set those aside. So those are just my budget issues. I mean, in general, I'm worried about the rapid rush towards early sine die. If it's for good purpose, if we're truly being thorough, then fine, we can end early. But otherwise, to me, it's a political decision to get back and campaign in their districts. And if we're making that choice and not actually allowing public feedback and transparency through our process, we're cutting things short. Oklahomans really deserve us to work all the way through May if we haven't solved the real problems in our state. And that's where I fear we are. What do you guys want to talk about?
Off of what you just said about how much of the education package is earmarked. The House passed a bill that would increase the minimum number of school days. Both the pro tem and the speaker said they still would like to see that pass and happen. Last year they had one day at the cost of $25 million just for that purpose. Curious if you have any thoughts on adding school days. Yes, there's more funding, but it's very specifically earmarked in a lot of cases. So do you have any concerns?
Yeah, I mean, we should not be adding more days unless we're adding more supports. And so if we're not adding extra money to make sure we have those extra bus days, those extra special ed assistant days, there's a whole lot of costs associated with an extra day of school. And also, our teachers are maxed. I know it's not fun to talk about, but class sizes are too big. So every educator I've talked to has said, more time doesn't help unless we have additional supports for those students.
You said something interesting a second ago, and I hadn't thought about it. You've got an early budget agreement, yet it appears their intention still is to run it through JCAB on Monday and then across the floors next week. So a pretty quick process versus a couple days or even weeks to review it.
Right.
Why?
I mean, this is our biggest duty, is the budget. Most states have their budget bills out in public months before a public vote. They have amendments that happen. In Oklahoma, that is not the standard. I did find out that the rules allow amendments on JCAB bills. We just don't do that. It's a cultural decision or a leadership decision not to allow amendments because that's the budget deal, right? To me, once that budget deal's been released, if it can't be improved and amended, that's not real transparency. And so if we haven't even seen bills yet and we're going to be voting on them Monday, we have incomplete information. We're not going to be able to hear back from people. And I think about last summer we had capital conversations up here where we're allowing people to take the mic and give their public testimony. And we had an incredible meeting right after the mental health cuts to community organizations. And we had people come talk about the services that were cut from their own personal perspective. It was really amazing. We heard from peer support specialists who help people get sober. We heard from people living with serious mental illness who use day supports to make sure they're not a burden on their family and to make sure they have access to care. Hearing those personal stories is something completely missing up here. It all happens one-on-one behind closed doors. And so other states have hearings where they listen to people. They allow experts to sign up. They allow other people to sign up about their concerns or thoughts or questions about a bill. This process is not more transparent just because it's early. You guys check it out?
I'll ask. I mean, I think you mentioned it briefly last week when all these bills were coming through, but we've got obviously a crowded August primary calendar for runoff that has some state questions that really are being pushed by some of the majority side that their voters might get excited about. We've got other state questions pushed in November that maybe they're less excited about. And so just talk about that and getting turnout to the polls on a primary runoff in August.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very political decision to choose August. I'm concerned that helping people be informed about the impact of these questions is going to be difficult. It costs a whole lot of money to communicate with voters all across the state. Who's going to spend money to do that communication? We don't have a publicly paid for way that we inform the public about these. So I'm really worried about whether people are going to be informed and they're going to understand the impact of these state questions. I don't know what's going to move forward in the next week, but I understand that we have a ton of questions sitting before us. I mean, we could have 10 in August, 8 in August, I think. That's a lot of questions. Actually that's something like California would do, have a whole lot of questions. Of course, they'd be citizen initiative petitions, but I'm just concerned that these are all things where the ones that go on the August ballot so far that I've seen are legislative power grabs. So where they're trying to take power out of the Constitution, bring it to the legislature. And so it's interesting to me that you would put those on the least voter turnout date. It's pretty clear that should take power away from voters.
Well, on the flip side, the voter ID one takes it out of a statutory state question and puts it in a constitutional state question, right? So I mean,
the power's still with the legislature on that voting question. So the voter ID question still lets the legislature define what that means. So I think that one's a facade. That's just a front, saying we're making it in the Constitution. But then if the legislature determines, I don't think people realize that still means you can use your voter ID, which is not a photo ID, right? In fact, now I'm worried that I said that out loud and they're going to add that to the bill. But, we're still leaving all that power with the legislature.
Just really quick on that also, those state questions arriving on those August primary ballots also means that independents will not get to see those on any ballot, right? Yeah,
independents can vote in any statewide election, but what's the impetus if you're not a primary voter? I mean, I think what you're talking about is who's spending money to get people to come to the polls? Who's helping inform people? We do not have a standard in Oklahoma that we push information to voters. I mean, other states, they do direct mailings to voters. They send them their ballot or they send them a nonpartisan election guide. We don't do that. So people just have to find out on their own. And so we count solely on the media and on paid advertising, right? So that's my worry.
I see. So just to be clear, it won't be a Democratic or primary.
Right. There will still be general ballots if a state question's there, for sure. And in fact, I asked the secretary about that and about how it works at the primary, and they said they'll have it on a separate sheet of paper, that they used to put those state questions with the primary ballots, but it can be confusing for the poll workers, and they want to make sure that that everybody got that state question and that it was separate from the partisan ballots.
Well, on the flip side of that, you've also got the minimum wage question in June that was certified in September 24.
Correct.
And meanwhile, in the last week, we've got a passel of state questions that are going to an August runoff ballot.
Right. They're rushing those out. the ones that the people have brought to us have either been denied because of very difficult verification processes, kicking out the open primaries question before it even got considered, and when it comes to raising the wages and potentially getting people the money they might need in their jobs, pushed it off very long. We're not willing to deal with that one. Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to ask about the parental tax credit that you mentioned earlier. So they're dedicating $25 million to this. Are you concerned that while they're dedicating money for this for people to use for private schools, that we did not see as much money as was discussed earlier in the session for public schools?
Yeah, I mean, that $25 million could be put to work immediately in our public schools, and it would matter. I mean, you're talking about, they're saying that the literacy coach initiative is $5 million, for instance. Could that be better and stronger with $10 million? Could we be providing better supports with $10 million, $15 million, $20 million? There are plenty of needs in our public schools that could be addressed with that. Why don't we have any money just going into the formula to our school districts across the state? Oklahoma has an amazing formula that makes sure that every student gets access to the same resources, but we're not putting money through that formula. Instead, they're earmarking it for specific projects.
Can you kind of remind me about how pay raise, step increases work for teachers? There's a minimum salary that the state mandates, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we follow a structured path forward going into the career mandating increases. So we've, in this budget, included funding to raise that minimum pay, starting pay by $2,000. How is that going to affect a teacher that has 10 years of service in or 15?
I believe the salary increase includes all the steps. I think that he introduced a whole new step, right? Yeah, so he added $2,000 to all the steps.
So if you're making $50,000,
It would move up to
years.
$52,000, right? So, I mean, thankfully, we're not just only affecting the newbies, but we do have a lot of new teachers, so we do need to think about that. We need to attract back veterans, and the kinds of things that will do that is not just that pay, but also, them knowing they have good support for class sizes, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it'll affect all of those. Yeah.
I do wonder if you have any concerns about, yes, there's that $2,000 raise, but you're also asking schools to pay that higher wage for a longer period of time. I don't know if you have any concerns about that, and then also I don't know if teachers, you're asking them to work more, if that maybe drains a little bit of excitement out of
I think if they increase the number of days required, there will be negotiated increases in salary to compensate for that, at least in districts that have a strong negotiation process. Some of our districts, teachers don't have as much of an association to fight for that. Certainly when it comes to support staff, not all support staff actually get access to negotiation. So I think you'll see that. And then, I know a lot of educators who have second jobs. They have summer jobs that help supplement their salary and make sure that they can cover. So I think we are cutting into that. We're also cutting into continuing ed time, where educators go out and take the science of reading, take those other courses. So yeah, I'm concerned about that. Do I think we should go to school more? Maybe. That'd be fine. But we've got to make sure the supports are adequate. Yeah. Anything else you guys want to hit on? I do want to say there's one thing in the budget that I'm doing more research on, but the $200 million sovereign wealth fund, according to NonDoc, is going to be invested by Invest in Oklahoma, which is a board that was just created, and is not a financial board, actually, and would mean private equity investments by our state. And I'm deeply concerned about taxpayer money going into private equity investments. So that's direct to companies, startup companies, many of whom fail. There's no protections, rarely any collateral, and I'm just worried because we've seen this across state government that we're trying to access these pots of money to put them into these direct investments, and we have to avoid corruption. If we set up more and more ways that our state government is using treasurer funds, pension funds, et cetera, to go straight to investments in our state with no protections or risk protections, we're going to lose taxpayer money, and it's also just straight corruption if we don't have protection from friends getting deals.
Would you rather see it invested more like how TSET invests their corporate?
We need an independent investment body for sure. I don't understand why we're locking up more funds. I think we're actually just it's a shell game. We're moving things from one savings account to another. But I'm concerned if we're going to put it in equity investments, what that means, at least the stock market, there's certain standards around transparency and certain kind of ethics and compliance. Direct equity investments, there's none of that. There's none.
Does OCAS do that already? A little bit in a limited form?
Very limited, yeah.
It's a 200 million.
Right. But Invest in Oklahoma was taken away from OCAST and is under the treasurer now. Yeah.
By that, just to be clear, you mean they're not a fiduciary, as in they're not legally responsible to be accountable for that money?
That's a great question. I mean, I think we're opening up what those standards are. So like with the treasurer, when we put in place Invest in Oklahoma, we gave him latitude to do up to, I think, 5% into direct investments. There's no standard of risk, right? So whereas before we would say you have a fiduciary responsibility, I think we absolved the treasurer of that when we gave him that 5% latitude. So anyway, we're getting geeky here, but I'm just worried. We're talking about $200 million that absolutely could be put to use for childcare, for, I'm thinking about our state parks. I mean, we have a huge backlog of problems with, that's one of our most important state assets. We have these buildings crumbling that are truly an economic driver for our local communities. Why would we not put that money towards improving those state parks and getting them in better shape? So I'm concerned that we're sending money out to private investments.
Real quick on that, no, that was the governor's ask, obviously, that the Republicans agreed to, but the state plane, I think there's $3 million in there for a new state plane that the governor came into office saying he didn't want it.
Right.
And sold the previous one when he first came in. Thoughts about that? I mean, it just seems like they kind of gave the governor what he wanted on that.
So the governor getting a plane again, that's actually kind of funny, because I think what you find is if we don't have good checks and balances, people are going to say they're doing reform, but are they really doing reform? And so I think we have to ask harder questions about some of the things that are proposed as business minded, and then see if they really have the long-term results. Maybe maybe it actually is cost effective because we spend more by him flying commercial. I don't know that, but I think we have to ask those questions up front, so that 5 years down the road we're not rebuying planes. That seems just wacky.
If you already talked about it, but I don't know. But do you have anything to say about the the Dream accounts? That was it 12.5 million. It is, I believe.
I mean, I haven't found that yet, but I just can't believe we're talking about that when we're not funding school lunches. We had a proposal before us that was significantly less money to fund school lunches for every kid who needs them. Let's start there. Why are we looking at private investment accounts when we've got very straightforward things we need to be taking care of for kids' safety and well-being? All right.